Today is May 14th. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It is a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today out of the Big Book, we're going to be reading the new chapter, How It Works, pages 58 through 60. That is the core of the program right there. And out of the personal stories, we are going to finish the story A Drunk Like You, pages 404 through 406. And finally, out of the 12 and 12, we're going to continue our journey through Tradition 3 by reading 142, the rest of it. So with all that, my friends, hope you're doing well this morning. It is a beautiful morning here. We just had the Northern Lights in the rolling hills of Tennessee over here. It was kind of neat to see that. And life is good. Just absolutely blown away by what my higher power can do. But anyways, let's get to the good stuff. All right, my friends. So if you recall from yesterday's reading, we were talking about, in We Agnostics, keeping that open mind. And I think that's the main idea that was stressed in chapter 4, which leads perfectly into chapter 5. Here are these steps. They're finally introduced in this particular book in order. These are the 12 steps, the program of recovery. And we'll go ahead and get right to it. Again, we're reading 58 through 60 today. Chapter 5, How It Works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we cannot. With all earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we've set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if He were sought. Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person's like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if people would only do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But, as with most humans, he's likely to have varied traits. Alright guys, absolutely great stuff. Can't wait to come back to this in a minute. So out of the personal story, A Drunk Like You, we previously read that our friend has joined these AA meetings, and at first, he goes to a meeting that might have been for, people who've had a little bit of sobriety under their belts, and it didn't really seem beneficial to our friend at first, but then he goes to a meeting for newcomers, and that's where he starts to hear some of the similarities. And some of his friends kind of point out some of the alcoholic traits that our friend has. So shortly after that, he loses his job, and we will find out what happens next. So again, we're going to be reading pages 404 through 406, finishing up the story today. We were able to stay on site in special offices set aside for the conduct of our job search. As part of this job search, I was allowed to go to a professional convention being held in the Southwest. Now somehow, between the time I lost my job and my flight to the convention, I decided maybe I was not an alcoholic, and I needed to test that theory. After all, I was a researcher and things had to be tested. I decided that on that plane, seemed like a safe place, I'd put the question to the test. If I could have just one drink and no more, I was not an alcoholic. Alcoholics can't do that. So when the stewardess came by to ask me if I wanted a drink, I said yes. She put 2 little bottles worth in a glass. No ice, thank you very much, and went up the aisle. On her way back, she asked if I wanted another. I said, yeah. I drank for the whole flight. Before dinner, during dinner, and after dinner. As we approached our destination, I searched in my pocket for a pen to fill out the in-flight magazine response card. I found this large coin. I took it out to see what it was. It was my 90-day pocket piece. And I was reminded of what I was doing. And the thought came to me, wow, those guys at the meeting were right. I am powerless over alcohol. I put that coin back in my pocket, and from that day to this, some 15 and a half years later, I have had no urge to drink. When I got back to my meeting, I told them what had happened. I don't know why. It was not like the old me to fess up to anything. They were concerned only whether I was still drinking, and I said, no, I'm not. I was worried that they were going to take my coin back. All they wanted to know was, what was I going to do now? I had no idea. They did, however. They said I needed a sponsor. So I found a sponsor. They said I needed more meetings. Well, how many? I wanted to know. They said that I only had to go to meetings on days I would have had to drink. They said I needed to identify, not compare. I didn't even know what they meant. What was the difference? Identifying, they said, was trying to see how I was like the people I was with. Comparing, they told me, was looking for the differences, usually seeing how I was better than others. One day we were talking about spiritual awakenings. Everyone talked a little about what happened to them, and when and how and all that. Then it came my turn. I said that I hadn't had one yet, but I was open to it. Well, two people were trying to talk at the same time. What have you been telling us about the airplane flight all this time? Well, I said, I was drinking and then the coin reminded me of what I did. And I decided I was powerless and couldn't drink anymore and stopped. One man said, well, that's it. What more do you want? I said, wait, what about the blinding white flash? What about it? He said, read the big book. The appendix explains the concept of a sudden change and a gradual change, and that not everybody has that blinding flash. Oh, I said. That was it? That was mine? Yeah, I was told. What more do you want? Actually, I've wanted something more dramatic, and my sponsor said what he so often did. So? And I found myself saying, well, if that's it, it'll have to do. Have to do? He replied. It was bigger and better than most, and more importantly, it worked. You stopped and didn't start again. Well, that worked for me. I have stayed in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous long enough to find the program in the Big Book and to practice all its principles in all my affairs on a daily basis. The last big hurdle was closing the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. As Jew, I was uncomfortable with it and decided to talk to my sponsor about it. So I said, the Lord's Prayer bothers me. I don't like closing with it. Oh, he said, what's the problem? Well, I'm Jewish and it's not a Jewish prayer. Well, then he said, say it in Jewish. I said, it would still be the Lord's Prayer. Right, he said. Then say something else you like. Your higher power, whatever you call it, is helping you and you need to say thank you. That was a big step for me. I finally began to separate the religious aspects of my life from AA's spiritual program. Now, the big difference to me is that religion is the ritual, and we all differ there. And spirituality is the way that we feel about what we do. It's about my personal contact with my personal higher power, as I understand him. Everything has turned around. I found a new job, which I then decided to leave. I opened my own business. I was able to put my two sons through college at large universities. My oldest son's great passion was to go on road trips and get away from home when it was time to come home on school breaks. Now he comes home regularly and brings friends. The younger son comes home often and calls regularly. My marriage is no longer on the brink and is better than ever. And the best is yet to come. All this and more I owe to the fellowship in the rooms and the program in the book. All right, my friends, beautiful stuff here as we conclude An Alcoholic Like You. All right, and finally we're on tradition number 3. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. And we left off yesterday where a friend wants to join AA, but admits right up front that he has another addiction. And most likely it's a drug addiction. And of course, the AA members are not sure whether to let him in. So let's see how it works out here. Again, we're finishing off page 142. At first, the elders could look only at the objections. We deal, they say, with alcoholics only. Shouldn't we sacrifice this one for the sake of the many? So went the discussion while the newcomer's fate hung in the balance. Then one of the three spoke in a very different voice. What we are really afraid of, he said, is our reputation. We are much more afraid of what people might say than the trouble that this strange alcoholic might bring. As we've been talking, 5 short words have been running through my mind. Something keeps repeating to me, What would the master do? Not another word was said. What more indeed could be said? Overjoyed, the newcomer plunged into 12-step work. Tirelessly, he laid AA's message before the scores of people. Since this was a very early group, those scores have since multiplied themselves into thousands. Never did he trouble anyone with his other difficulty. AA had taken its first step in the formation of Tradition 3. All right, great stuff right here. I love this. And these are the early days of AA. And again, what would the master do? Powerful stuff. And going back to the personal story real fast, sometimes these, I'm so grateful that the Big Book has the appendix where they explain the difference between a spiritual awakening and a spiritual experience, and how often a spiritual experience is a quick event. It's a one-time thing that also right afterwards there's a radical change. And we've read a lot of stories where in this book where people have had that spiritual experience. However, I'm so glad that the appendix makes a distinction between that and an awakening. An awakening is more of what I had, and I continue to have, where I went through the steps and had a sponsor kind of take me through everything. And it was a gradual change. My outlook on life and, the promises, which we're going to be reading here soon, they started to come true. But there was really no lightning flash that I remember. These are things that usually came with time, or my wife would notice it, or I would journal everything, and then I would notice, wow, I don't seem to worry about that stuff anymore. So I'm glad, and it looks like our friend here, he wants that dramatic spiritual experience, right, that he can tell people. But really, in a way, it is dramatic. He just so happens to find that little chip when he's in the plane. And that reminds him that he's powerless. And that from that moment on, he decides not to drink anymore. To me, I still say that's dramatic. Seems pretty interesting that he finds that chip there, and that's what reminds him. And then finally, moving on to the core text here, how it works. I mean, this right here is the heart of the program. Finally laying out all the steps here. And, and again, as I said yesterday, I believe that this book was written in a very intentional order here. It says right after the 12 steps, our description of the alcoholic, the doctor's opinion, the chapter to the agnostic, that's the chapter we just read, and our personal adventures, that's Bill's story and all the stories after, make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, there's step 1. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. That's step 2, part of it. And then C, that God could and would if he were sought. Okay, and that's step 2 going to step 3. And right here is where we have to get rigorously honest. It says so, Half measures availed us nothing. That's something I always think about, There were times, especially with step 4 and step 5, step 9, there were times where I didn't want to tell everything. There were times where I did not want to say the embarrassing stuff. But I would always, it was like the God of my understanding kept reminding me, hey, half measures avail us nothing. Rob, if you do this halfway, it's not going to help. So finally, I would let that final bag go, and I would tell everything. I can say this from personal experience. It was life-changing. When I'm honest, and I try to work these steps to this day, it is life-changing. And literally for me, it's like a reset every day. I'm reminded, and especially now that I'm doing this podcast, I'm reminded about these steps constantly. And every day I try to do 10, 11, and 12. I try to continue to take this personal inventory. Because guess what? I'm still human. I'm still going to mess up. This day is going to present a whole new set of challenges, and I'm not exactly going to get it right every single time. And then 11, as soon as I wake up, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God, praying for His will to be done, and the power for me to carry it out. So seeking through prayer and listening through meditation. And then finally, carrying the message by my words, by my actions each day. And I'm very blessed. I have a job where I can carry the message to a lot of people. Every single day I can serve, I can do that. And then practice these principles in all my affairs, not just the alcohol. How can I apply the 12 steps to anxiety, to lust, or to gluttony? All my affairs. This is going to be a lifetime practice. But I am so grateful that I have these basic spiritual tools, these power tools, that I can practice every single day for every single thing. This is a beautiful way of life. That leads to a more honest way of life for me. And honestly, this changed my life exponentially for the better. So, just reading these steps, there's something magical to them for me. And then right after the steps, we start talking about step 3. And it's going to break down each one of these steps as we go about this chapter and the next. But guys, we are way over time. I got a little carried away. See, this is what happens. I get excited to talk about these steps. But my friends, I cannot stress this enough. If you are sober today, you are a miracle. And if you've been able to listen along with us as we go through this book, you've heard so many things, and particularly these 12 steps. There's suggestions, but these suggestions have saved my life, and I believe that they can help you too. I think the world could benefit from doing these things, but that's another discussion for another day. If you'd ever like to reach out to us, our email is bigbookdaily@gmail.com. We would love to hear from your experience, strength, and hope. I'd love to share it on the show. I'd be happy to do that. And as always, I don't speak on behalf of AA or NA or any other sect or denomination. I am just a friend in recovery, honored to be here today. And my friends, if we're given another set of 24 hours, I sincerely look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.